Hello, my name is Phoebe, and I will be reading to you the How to Train Your Dragon books by Cressida Cowell. In this video, I'll be reading the first few chapters. Alright, so here we have a map of the whole archipelago. This is where Hiccup lives. Here's Hiccup. So a note from the hero. There were dragons when I was a boy. They were great, grim sky dragons that nested on the cliff tops like gigantic, scary birds. Little brown scuttly dragons that hunted down the mice and rats in well-organized packs. Preposterously huge sea dragons that were 20 times as big as the big blue whale and who killed for the fun of it. You will have to take my word for it, for the dragons are disappearing so fast that they may soon become extinct. Nobody knows what is happening. They are crawling back into the sea from whence they came, leaving not a bone, not a fang in the earth for the men of the future to remember them by. So in order that these amazing creatures should not be forgotten, I will tell this true story from my childhood. I was not the sort of boy who could train a dragon with a mere lifting of an eyebrow. I was not a natural at the heroism business. I had to work at it. This is the story of becoming a hero the hard way. Chapter 1. First Catch Your Dragon. This is a picture of Gobber. Here. See? He's big and hairy. Long ago, on the wild and windy Isle of Berk, a smallish Viking with a longish name stood up to his ankles in snow. Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III, the hope and heir to the tribe of the Hairy Hooligans, had been feeling slightly sick ever since he woke up that morning. 10 boys, including Hiccup, were hoping to become full members of the tribe by passing the dragon initiation program. They were standing on a bleak little beach at the bleakest spot on the whole bleak island. A heavy snow was falling. "Pay attention!" screamed Gobber the Belch, the soldier in charge of teaching initiation. "This will be your first military operation, and Hiccup will be commanding the team." "Oh, not Hiccup," groaned Dog's Breath, the dull brain, and most of the other boys. "You can't put Hiccup in charge, sir. He's useless." Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III, the hope and heir to the tribe of the Hairy Hooligans, wiped his nose miserably on his sleeve. He sank a little deeper into the snow. "Anybody would be better than Hiccup," sneered Snot-Faced Snotlout. "Even Fishlegs would be better than Hiccup." Fishlegs had a squint that made him as blind as a jellyfish and an allergy to reptiles. "Silence!" roared Gobber the Belch. The next boy to speak has limpets for lunch for the next 3 weeks. There was absolute silence immediately. Limpets are a bit like worms and a bit like snot and a lot less tasty than either. "Hiccup will be in charge, and that is an order," screamed Gobber, who didn't do noises quieter than screaming. He was a 7-foot giant with a mad glint in his one working eye and a beard like exploding fireworks. Despite the freezing cold, he was wearing hairy shorts and a teeny-weeny deerskin vest that showed off his lobster-red skin and bulging muscles. He was holding a flaming torch in one gigantic fist. "Hiccup will be leading you, although he is, admittedly, completely useless, because Hiccup is the son of the chief, and that's the way things go with us Vikings. Where do you think you are, the Republic of Rome? Anyway, that is the least of your problems today. You are here to prove yourself as a Viking hero, and it is an ancient tradition of the hooligan tribe that you should," Gobber paused dramatically, "first catch your dragon." "Oh, suffering scallops," thought Hiccup. "Our dragons are what set us apart," bellowed Gobber. "Lesser humans train hawks to hunt for them, horses to carry them. It is only the Viking heroes who dare to tame the wildest, most dangerous creatures on earth." Gobber spat solemnly into the snow. "There are 3 parts to the dragon initiation test. The first and most dangerous part is a test of your courage and skill at burglary. If you wish to enter the Hairy Hooligan tribe, you must first catch your dragon. And that is why," continued Gobber at full volume, "I have brought you to this scenic spot. Take a look at Wild Dragon Cliff itself." The 10 boys tipped their heads backward. The cliff loomed dizzyingly high above them, black and sinister. In summer, you could barely even see the cliff, as dragons of all shapes and sizes swarmed over it, snapping and biting and sending up a cacophony of noise that could be heard all over Berk. But in winter, the dragons were hibernating, and the cliff fell silent, except for the ominous, low rumble of their snores. Hiccup could feel the vibrations through his sandals. "Now," said Gobber, "do you notice those 4 caves about halfway up the cliff, grouped roughly in the shape of a skull?" The boys nodded. "Inside the cave that would be the right eye of the skull is the dragon nursery, where there are, at this very moment, 3,000 young dragons having their last few weeks of winter's sleep." "Oh," muttered the boys excitedly. Hiccup swallowed hard. He happened to know considerably more about dragons than anybody else there. Ever since he was a small boy, he had been fascinated by the creatures. He'd spent hour after long hour dragon watching in secret. Dragon spotters were thought to be geeks and nerds, hence the need for secrecy. And what Hiccup had learned about dragons told him that walking into a cave with 3,000 dragons in it was an act of madness. No one else seemed too concerned, however. "In a few minutes I want you to take one of these baskets and start climbing the cliff," commanded Gobber the Belch. "Once you are at the cliff entrance, you are on your own. I am too large to squeeze my way into the tunnels that lead to the dragon nursery. You will enter the cave quietly, and that means you too, Warty Hog, unless you want to become the first spring meal for 3,000 hungry dragons." "Ha ha ha!" Gobber laughed heartily at his little joke, then continued, "Dragons this size are normally fairly harmless to man, but in these numbers they will set upon you like piranhas. There would be nothing left of even a fatso like you, Warty Hog. Just a pile of bones in your helmet. Ha ha ha! So, you will walk quietly through the cave and each boy will steal 1 sleeping dragon. Lift the dragon gently from the rock and place it in your basket. Any questions so far?" Nobody had any questions. "In the unlikely event that you do wake the dragons, and you would have to be idiotically stupid to do so, run like thunder for the entrance to the cave. Dragons do not like cold weather, and the snow will probably stop them in their tracks." "Probably," thought Hiccup. "Oh well, that's reassuring." "I suggest that you spend a little time choosing your dragon. It is important to get one the correct size. This will be the dragon that hunts fish for you and pulls down deer for you. You will catch the dragon that will carry you into battle later on, when you are much older and a warrior of the tribe. But, nonetheless, you want an impressive animal, so a rough guide would be, choose the biggest creature that will fit into your basket. Don't linger for too long in there." Linger, thought Hiccup, in a cave full of 3,000 sleeping dragons. "I need not tell you," Gobber continued cheerfully, "that if you return to the spot without a dragon, it is hardly worth coming back at all. Anybody who fails this task will be put into immediate exile. The hairy hooligan tribe has no use for failures. Only the strong can belong." Unhappily, Hiccup looked round at the distant horizon. Nothing but snow and sea as far as the eye could see. Exile didn't look too promising either. "Right," said Gobber briskly. "Each boy take a basket to put their dragon in and we'll get going." The boys rushed to get their baskets, chattering happily and excitedly. "I'm going to get one of those monstrous nightmare ones with the extra extendable claws. They're really scary," boasted Snotlout. "Oh, shut up, Snotlout, you can't," said Speedy Fist. "Only Hiccup can have a monstrous nightmare. You have to be the son of a chief." Hiccup's father was Stoic the Vast, the fearsome chief of the hairy hooligan tribe. "Hiccup," sneered Snotlout. "If he's as useless as this as he is at Bashyball, we'll be lucky if he even gets one of the basic browns." The basic brown was the most common type of dragon, a serviceable beast but without much glamour. "Shut up and get into line, you miserable tadpoles," yelled Gobber the Belch. The boys scrambled into their places, baskets on their backs, and stood to attention. Gobber walked along the line, lighting the torch that each boy held in front of him from the great flare on his hand. "In half an hour's time, you will be a Viking warrior, with your faithful serpent at your side." Here's a little picture, a little chart explaining the basic browns. So, the common or garden and the basic brown. The common or garden and the basic brown are so similar that they can be dealt with together. These are the most familiar breeds, the ones we instantly think of when we say dragons. They are poor hunters, but they are easy to train. These dragons are the best kind for family pets, although, as with a lion or a tiger, they should never be left unsupervised with very young children. Statistics. Colors. Green and yellow, all shades of brown. Armed with basic teeth and claws. 3. Defenses. Prickly spines. 2. Radar. None. Poison. None. Hunting ability. Lethargic hunters. 3. Speed. Swift in retreat. 8. Fear and fight factor. Good when angry. 4. Continuing with Gobber. Or breakfasting with Woden in the Valhalla with dragon's teeth in your bottom, screamed Gobber with horrible enthusiasm. Death or glory, yelled Gobber. Death or glory, yelled 8 boys back at him frantically. Death, thought Hiccup and Fishleg sadly. Gobber paused dramatically, with the horn to his lips. I think this could possibly be the worst moment of my life. So far, thought Hiccup to himself, as he waited for the blast of the horn. And if they shout much louder, we're going to wake up those dragons before they even start. Parr! Gobber blew the horn. Chapter 2. Inside the Dragon Nursery. We have a few more drawings here. So that's Dog's Breath. And that's Snotlout. You have probably guessed by now that Hiccup was not your natural Viking hero. For a start, he didn't look like a hero. Somebody like Snotlout, for instance, was tall, muscly, covered in skeleton tattoos, and already had the beginnings of a small mustache. This consisted of a few straggly yellow hairs clinging to his upper lip, and was deeply unpleasant to look at, but still impressively manly for a boy not yet 13. Hiccup was on the small side, and had the kind of face that was almost entirely unmemorable. He did have heroic hair, which was a very bright red and stood up vertically, however much you tried to wet it down with seawater. But nobody ever saw that because it was hidden under his helmet most of the time. You would never have picked Hiccup out of those 10 boys to be the hero of this story. Snotlout was good at everything and a natural leader. Dog's Breath was as tall as his father and could do amusing things like farting to the tune of the Burke National Anthem. Hiccup was just absolutely average, the kind of unremarkable, skinny, freckled boy who was easy to overlook in a crowd. So, when Gobber blew the horn and moved out of sight to find a comfortable rock to sit on and eat his mussel and tomato sandwich, Snotlout pushed Hiccup out of the way and took charge. Okay, listen up, boys, he whispered in a menacing fashion. I am in charge, not the useless. And anybody who objects gets a knuckle sandwich from Dog's Breath the Dough-Brain. Ugh, grunted Dog's Breath, pounding his fists together in happy excitement. Dog's Breath was Snotlout's chief sidekick and a great big gorilla of a boy. Bash him, Dog's Breath, to show what I mean. Dog's Breath was delighted to oblige. He gave Hiccup a shove that sent him sprawling headfirst into the snow, then ground his face in it. Pay attention, hissed Snotlout. The boys dragged their eyes away from Dog's Breath and Hiccup and paid attention. Rope yourselves together. The best climber should go first. Well, that's you, of course, Snotlout, said Fishlegs. You're the best at everything, aren't you? Snotlout looked at Fishlegs suspiciously. It was difficult to tell whether Fishlegs was laughing at him or not because of his squint. That's right, Fishlegs, said Snotlout. I am. And, just in case he had been laughing at him, bash him, Dog's Breath. While Dog's Breath pushed Fishlegs down to join Hiccup in the snow, everybody started roping themselves together. Hiccup and Fishlegs were the last to be tied on, just behind a flushed and triumphant Dog's Breath. Oh, brilliant, muttered Fishlegs. I'm about to enter a cave full of man-eating reptiles tied up to 8 complete maniacs. If we get to the cave, said Hiccup nervously, looking up at the sheer black cliff. Hiccup put the lighted torch between his teeth to leave his hands free, and started climbing after the others. It was a perilous climb. The rocks were slippery with snow, and the other boys were thoroughly overexcited, making the ascent far too quickly. At one point, Clueless missed his footing and fell, luckily onto Dog's Breath, who caught him by the back of his trousers and heaved him back onto the rock again, before he brought the whole lot of them down. When they finally made it to the mouth of the cave, Hiccup looked down briefly at the sea pounding the rocks way below, and swallowed very hard. Untie the ropes, ordered Snotlout, his eyes popping with excitement at the thought of the dangers to come. Hiccup goes into the cave first, because he is the son of the chief, he sneered. And if any of the dragons are awake, He'll be the first to know about it. Once we're in the cave, it's every man for himself. Only the strong can belong. Although he wasn't your usual mindless thug of a hooligan, Hiccup wasn't a wimp either. Being frightened is not the same as being a coward. Maybe he was as brave as anyone else there, because he went to catch a dragon despite knowing what dragons are like. And when he had climbed perilously to the mouth of the cave and had found that inside there was a long, twisty tunnel, he still went down it, despite not being too keen on long, twisty tunnels with dragons at the end of them. The tunnel was dripping and clammy. At times it was high enough for the boys to walk upright. Then it would close down into narrow, claustrophobic holes that the boys could only just squeeze through, squirming on their stomachs with the flares held in their mouths. After 10 long minutes of walking and crawling into the heart of the cave, the stench of dragons, a salty stink of seaweed, and old mackerel heads got stronger and stronger, until finally it became unbearable and the tunnel opened up into an enormous cavern. The cavern was full of more dragons than Hiccup could ever have imagined existed. They were every possible color and size, and they included all the species that Hiccup had heard of, and quite a few more that he hadn't. Hiccup started sweating as he looked around him, at pile after pile of the animals, draped over every available surface, even hanging upside down from the roof like giant bats. They were all fast asleep, and most of them were snoring in unison. This was a sound so loud and so deep that it seemed to penetrate right into Hiccup's body and vibrate around his soft insides, churning his stomach and bowels and forcing his heart to beat at the same slow dragon pulse. If just one of these countless creatures were to wake up, it would raise the alarm to the others and the boys would meet a horrible death. Hiccup had once seen a deer that had wandered too close to Wild Dragon Cliff, torn to pieces in a matter of minutes. Hiccup closed his eyes. "I will not think about it," he said to himself. "I will not." None of the other boys were thinking about it. Ignorance is very useful in such circumstances. Their eyes were popping with excitement as they walked to the cave, hands over their noses to keep out the revolting smell, looking for the biggest dragon they could find that would fit in their basket. They left the torches in a pile at the entrance. The cavern was already well lit by the glowworms, huge, sluggish animals dotted here and there that shone with a steady yet dim fluorescence, like a low-watt light bulb. And the flame huffers gave off extra little bursts of light that flickered on and off as they breathed in and out. Predictably, most of the boys headed toward the plug uglies of the dragon world. Snotlout made a big fuss about grabbing a vicious-looking monstrous nightmare, smiling nastily at Hiccup as he did so. Snotlout was the son of Baggy Bum the Beer Belly, Stoic the Vast's younger brother. He was intending to get rid of Hiccup sometime in the future so that he, Snotlout, would become chief of the Hairy Hooligan tribe. And a gruesome and terrifying chief, as Snotlout meant to be, would need a properly awesome dragon. Warty Hog and Dog's Breath got into a loudly whispered fight over a Gronkle, a heavily armored brute with fangs like kitchen knives sticking out in such numbers that it couldn't keep its mouth shut. Dog's Breath won, then managed to drop it as he was trying to bundle it into his basket. The weaponry of the beast made a horribly loud clatter as it landed on the floor of the cavern. The Gronkle opened its evil crocodile eyes. Everybody held their breath. The Gronkle stared ahead. It was difficult to tell from its blank expression whether it was awake or fast asleep. Hiccup realized, in an agony of suspense, that the gossamer thin third eyelid was still down. And there it stayed for a few heart-stopping moments, until it slowly closed its upper eyelids again. Amazingly, not one of the other dragons woke up. A few grumbled groggily before making themselves comfy again, but most were in such a stupor that they barely even stirred. Hiccup let out his breath. Maybe these dragons were so dead to the world that nothing would wake them from their slumber. He swallowed hard, muttered a prayer to Loki, the patron saint of sneaky exploits, and edged forward cautiously to grab the most unconscious-looking dragon so he could get out of this nightmare as fast as possible. Here's a little chart about the Gronkle. See the Gronkle? It's a little blurry. The Gronkle. The Gronkle is the plug ugly of the dragon world, but what it lacks in looks, it makes up for on the battlefield. They can be slow and, dare I say it, stupid. And sometimes they get so fat that they are unable to take off. They're also prone to dragon acne. Statistics. Colors. Snot green. boogie beige, pooey brown. Armed with all the best in dragon weaponry. Fangs like daggers, extra spike on neck, ball with spike on end of tail. 8. Defenses. Super thick, flame-proof, and scratch-proof skin. 9. Radar. None. Poison. None. Hunting ability. Gronkos are slow to maneuver in the air. 0. Speed. See above. 5. Fear and fight factor. Terrifying in action. 9. It is a little-known fact that dragons grow colder the deeper they sleep. It is even possible for dragons to go into a sleep coma in which they are icy cold with no obvious pulse or breath or heartbeat. They can stay in this state for centuries, and only a highly skilled expert can tell from looking at them if they are alive or dead. But a dragon who is awake or lightly sleeping is very warm indeed, like bread that has just come out of the oven. Hiccup found one that was about the right size and fairly cool to the touch and maneuvered it into his basket as quickly and carefully as he could. It was a very basic brown, but at the moment Hiccup could not have cared less. Even though it was barely half-grown, it was surprisingly heavy. I did it, I did it, I did it, he chanted happily to himself. At least he wasn't going to be the only boy in the class who didn't have a dragon. Everybody seemed to have gotten themselves one by now, and they were all making their way quietly toward the exit. Everybody that was except for Fishlegs, who was already covered in a bright red itchy rash and was at that very moment approaching a pile of knottily entangled natters on very loud tiptoes. Fishlegs was even worse at burglary than Dog's Breath. Hiccup stopped dead in his tracks. "Don't do it, Fishlegs. Please don't do it," he whispered. But Fishlegs was fed up with Snotlat's taunting and of being sneered at and jeered at. He was going to get himself a really cool dragon that all the other boys would respect. Squinting so hard he could barely see the pile of dragons, his eyes streaming, and scratching himself violently, Fishlegs reached slowly toward the bottommost dragon, took one leg in his hand, and gently yanked. The entire pile came crashing down in a furious tangle of limbs and wings and ears. Every boy in the cavern gave a horrified gasp. Most of the natters snapped crossly at each other before settling back down to sleep. One brute, bigger than the others, opened his eyes and blinked a few times. Hiccup noted, with great relief, that the third eyelid was still down. The boys waited for the eyes to close, and then Fishlegs sneezed. 4 gigantic sneezes that went echoing and bouncing off the cavern walls. The big natter stared sightlessly ahead, frozen like a dragon statue. But very faintly, an ominous purring noise began in his throat, and very slowly, the third eyelid slid upwards. "Uh-oh," whispered Hiccup. The natter's head suddenly whipped around to face Fishlegs, its yellow cat eyes snapping into focus on the boy. It unfolded its wings to their greatest extent and stealthily advanced, like a panther about to spring. It opened its mouth wide enough to show the forked dragon tongue and... "Run!" shouted Hiccup, grabbing Fishlegs' arm and dragging him away. The boys ran for the exit tunnel. Fishlegs and Hiccup were the last to get there. There was no time to pick up the torches, so they were running in the pitch dark. The basket with the basic brown dragon in it was bumping on Hiccup's back. They had 2 minutes start on the dragons because it took a while for the first dragon to wake everybody up. But Hiccup could hear a furious roaring and flapping as the dragon started to pour into the tunnel after the boys. He ran a little faster. The dragons could move faster than the boys because they could see better in the dark, but they were held up when the tunnel got smaller, and they had to fold their wings up to squirm through. "I haven't got a dragon," panted Fishlegs, a couple of paces behind Hiccup. "That," said Hiccup, as he scrambled frantically on his elbows through a narrow bit, "is the least, of our problems. They're gaining on us." "No dragon," repeated Fishlegs stubbornly. "Oh, for Thor's sake," snapped Hiccup. He thrust his basket into Fishlegs' arms and grabbed the empty one from Fishlegs' back. "Have mine, then. Wait here." And Hiccup turned and went back through the narrow bit, even though the roaring was getting louder and closer by the second. "What are you doing?" screamed Fishlegs, frantically dancing up and down on the spot. Hiccup came back through the hole again, precious moments later. Fishlegs grabbed hold of an arm to help haul him through. They could hear a horrible snuffling that sounded as if the nose of a dragon had entered the other end of the hole. Hiccup bunged a rock at it, and it squealed indignantly. They turned a corner, and suddenly they could see light from outside at the end of the final tunnel. Fishlegs went first, but just as Hiccup was kneeling down to follow, a dragon pounced on him with a flap and a shriek. Hiccup hit it, and it fell back enough for him to crawl toward the light. Another dragon, or maybe the same one, sank its fangs into Hiccup's calf. He was so desperate to get out, he dragged the animal through with him. As soon as Hiccup's head and shoulders were through into the light, there was Gobber. He grabbed Hiccup under the armpits and hauled him out, dragons pouring after him. "Jump!" yelled Gobber, as he stunned the dragon with one blow of his mighty fist. "What do you mean, jump?" Hiccup hesitated as he looked down at the dizzyingly drop into the sea. "No time to climb down," panted Gobber, banging a couple of dragons' heads together and bouncing 3 more off his gigantic belly. "Jump!" Hiccup closed his eyes and leaped off the cliff. As he plunged through the air, the dragon that was attached to his leg released the straws with a squawk of alarm and flew off. Hiccup was traveling at such speed by the time he hit the water that it didn't feel like water at all, more like something hard and painful, and so cold that he nearly passed out. He spluttered to the surface, amazed to find that he didn't appear to be dead, and was immediately drenched by the gigantic splash of Gobber the Bilge landing a couple of feet away from him. Shrieking furiously, the dragon swarmed out of the cave and dive-bombed the floating Vikings. Hiccup pulled his helmet as far down as it would go. There were horrible scraping sounds as dragon's talons raked across the metal. Another one landed, hissing, on the water right in front of Hiccup's face. It took off again with a screech when it felt how cold the sea was. The dragons didn't like flying through the snow, and, with relief, Hiccup watched as they flew back to scream terrible dragon insults and dragonese from the warmth of the cave entrance. Gobber started to pull the boys out of the sea and onto the rocks. Viking boys are strong swimmers, but it is difficult to keep afloat when you have a basket full of trapped, terrified dragons on your back. Hiccup was the last to be saved, just in time as the cold was beginning to put him to sleep. Well, at least that wasn't death, thought Hiccup, as Gobber grabbed him by the neck to rescue him, nearly drowning him again in the process. But it certainly wasn't glory either. And I think that's a good place to stop for this video. Thank you for listening.